Idealism means the belief that mind, spirit, or consciousness is the fundamental reality. It suggests that the physical world is either an appearance or expression of mind, or does it ultimately mental in its essence. Idealism prioritizes ideas and concepts over physical matter in understanding nature of reality. Figures in the history of idealism are Plato, George Berkeley, Immanuel Kant, and George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel.
My name is FARRA binti Muhammad NAZRI, and in this section, I will explain 5 main principles of idealism that have shaped international relations, theory, and practice. So, the main point number 1 is belief in the goodness of human nature and moral progress. Idealism begins with the belief that human beings are inherently rational and capable of moral progress. Unlike realism, which views international relations as driven by power and self-interest, idealism sees the potential for ethical behavior among both individuals and states. It argues that education, diplomacy, and institutions can guide nations toward peace. This belief in moral development suggests that war is not inevitable but rather a failure of systems and leadership. When states act out of shared value and mutual respect, the likelihood of conflict significantly decreases. Idealists believe that by learning from past mistakes and embracing moral principles, international relations can be transformed into a more peaceful and just order. So let's move on to the main point number 2, which is the role of international law and institutions. A second major principle of idealism is the strong emphasis on international law and institutions. Idealists says that just as domestic societies rely on laws and governance to maintain order, the international system requires similar structures. Organizations such as the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, and the International Criminal Court represent attempts to build a rule-based global order. These institutions help mediate disputes, promote cooperation, and hold states accountable for their actions. Idealists believe that multilateralism, where nations work together through international body, is essential to maintaining peace and preventing unilateral aggression. In their view, laws and institutions not only guide behavior but help establish norms that promote trust and long-term stability. Main point number 3 is promotion of democracy and liberal values. Idealism also places great importance on the spread of domestic governance and liberal values as a pathway to peace. According to the domestic peace theory, which is grounded in idealist thinking, democratic states are less likely to engage in war with one another because they are accountable to their citizens and operate under transparent political process. Idealists argue that democracy promotes dialogue, compromise, and respect for human rights, which is value that reduce the chances of violent conflict. In this sense, idealism supports international efforts to strengthen civil liberties, electoral integrity, and political freedom. By promoting democratic ideals globally, idealists believe that international relations can become more cooperative, predictable, and peaceful. Moving on to the main point number 4, which is economic interdependence as a tool for peace. Another vital principle in idealist theory is the belief that economic interdependence can act as a strong deterrent to war. Idealists argue that when countries are economically connected through trade, investment, and shared markets, they are less likely to go to war because the cost of conflict would outweigh any potential gains. This is visible in regions like the European Union, where economic integration has played a significant role in maintaining peace for decades. Idealists believe that globalization can manage equitable, can increase mutual benefits and reduce hostilities. They view economic cooperation not only as a practical necessity but also a foundation for building long-lasting international partnerships. Last but not least, commitment to peaceful change and reform. Finally, idealism emphasizes the potential for peaceful change in the international systems. It rejects the idea that global politics are unchanging or permanently anarchic. Instead, idealists believe that through education, diplomacy, and cultural exchange, the world can evolve toward greater understanding and cooperation. They support initiatives such as peace education, cross-border dialogues, and humanitarian programs as ways to foster empathy and reduce mistrust among nations. For idealists, change is not only possible but essential. The international system, they argue, should be continually reformed to reflect evolving values, new challenges, and the shared interests of humanity. This enduring optimism sets idealism apart as a theory committed to building a better global future.
My name is FARRIEZZUAN. Today I'll be presenting an analysis on the theory of idealism in international relations. I will be focusing on their strengths. While often being contrasted with realism, idealism offers a unique and morally driven lens through which we can understand global politics and diplomacy. The first key of strength of idealism is promoting peace. Idealism encourages diplomatic negotiations and collective action to settle disputes. It is so that cruel actions such as war, oppression, or unnecessary suffering can be prevented. It is not just an idea, but it's also a wake-up call for actions that needs to replace violence with dialogue, aggression with understanding, and retaliation with compromise. Instead of responding to tension with anger, idealism believes in building bridge by using peaceful ways, such as dialogue, treaties, and joint agreement to resolve conflict. This strength is especially powerful in today's interconnected world, where war no longer just affects two nations, but it also affects their economies, securities, refugees, and even the environment. Idealists insist that working together through diplomatic channel is not only possible, but it is essential to avoid cruelty and loss. It asks us why wait until violence erupts when we can prevent it earlier. Idealism taught us to do that. Dispute can be settled through collective responsibility and shared belief in humanity. For the second strength of idealism is strong moral focus. Unlike realism, which focus on power, survival, and nation interests at the center of the decision making, idealism puts ethics front and center. It says that values just like justice, fairness, and human rights should guide global decision, and not just a strategic or political calculations. Idealism believes that what is right must matter more than what is profitable. It asks global leaders to consider, are our actions just, are we treating others fairly, and are we protecting the dignity of every human being. This ethics-focused mindset has led to real changes in international law and diplomacy. As an example, the global focus on human rights, anti-genocide convention, and international humanitarian aid all came from the idealist belief that morality should not be an optional in international affairs. This approach demands that country looks more thoroughly that whenever injustice occurs, it must be their jobs to try to solve it, even if it doesn't benefit them. They must treat others not just as commodities, but as a fellow human with equal worth. In a world filled with inequality and suffering, idealism reminds us that ethics are not a luxury, they are a necessity. The third major strength is creation of global cooperation. Idealism has helped to inspire the creation of global organizations like United Nations, which still play key roles in promoting peace and cooperation in today's world. When the world faces unimaginable destruction, after the World War II, it was idealism that pushed world leaders to try something new, to build institutions based not on fear but on a shared responsibility. The United Nations, UNESCO, the World and the World Health Organization, these are the real world outcome of idealist thinking. These institutions provide a platform for large, small, rich and even poor nations to work together as one, whether their issue is hunger, education, climate change or even armed conflict. These organizations make cooperation possible as they focusing on idealism belief that solutions should be built on dialogue, not dominations. Through idealism, the world is not seen as battlefield, but is seen as an community. That's all. I will talk about the criticism and limitation of idealisms. Idealism gives us a hopeful way of looking at international relations by focusing on peace, ethics, and cooperation. But in the real world, things doesn't always go as planned. It is important for us to understand where and why idealism doesn't really work. So the first criticism is naivety. People argue that idealism is overly optimistic about human nature and the willingness of nations to obey the international law. Idealism assumes that if we create rules and institutions based on ethics, countries will follow them. But the world doesn't always work that way. Throughout history itself, we have seen nations act selfishly by breaking agreements and ignore international law when it suits their interests. Critics believe idealism trusts too much in the goodness of people and nations that it fails to consider how power, fear, and national interest often influence the decision more than fairness or morality. As an example, even with treaties and international agreements in place, wars still happen and human rights are still violated. So, while idealism hopes for cooperation, critics feels that it underestimates how difficult it is to achieve that cooperation in the real world. The second limitation is about real-world applicability. This refers to how hard it can be to apply idealist ideas in actual situations, especially during conflicts and power disputes. In theory, idealism encourages dialogue with mutual respect and global cooperation. But when real world conflict happens like Russian-Ukraine war, those ideas often struggle to stop the violence. In these cases, peaceful negotiation isn't always enough. Sometimes when a side is refused to compromise or the situation has become too dangerous for the diplomacy alone. Critics argue that idealism doesn't provide strong enough tools to handle these kind of situations. It may offer good intentions, but not always an effective actions. In contrast with realisms, which focus more on practical strategy, such as building military strength or forming strong alliance, which can be more effective in protecting national interests during crises. So, while idealism aims high, it often find it is difficult to succeed when faced with real-world complexities. The third point is about moral focus, which can actually be both a strength and weaknesses for idealisms. Idealism says values like justice, fairness, and human rights should guide global decisions, not just power. This sounds great in theory, and many people support this approach, but in real life, it is not always that simple. Different countries and cultures have different views on what's fair or just. One country sees as protecting human rights, another might see as interfering in its sovereignty. This creates confusions, disagreement, and even tension between them. Critics also say that idealism can be too focused on values and not enough on realities. It may ignore practical concerns like national security or economic stability when trying to make the decision only based on ethics. In some situations, this moral focus can even backfire. As an example, when a country tries to push its value on others, it may be seen as arrogant or biased, even with their good intention. So, while ethics are important, idealism sometimes put them so front and center that it loses its flexibility needed to deal with real-world challenges.
Okay, hi, my name is MAISARAH binti MAZLAN, and today I will talk about the impact of idealism in international relations. So for the first impact is idealism lead to the creation of international institutions such as the League of Nations and the United Nations. So this organization were formed to encourage countries to cooperation instead of fighting war. So they provide a platform for dialogue and help manage global issues like security and diplomacy. So it will make the world more stable and peaceful. So moving on to the next one is idealism promotes peace and diplomacy by encouraging countries to solve their difference through dialogue rather than conflict. So it supports the development of peace treaties and international law that guard countries' behavior. So for this idealism, it also emphasizes the importance of soft power like culture exchange, humanitarian aid, and shared value. It also can help build trust and understanding between nations. So for the third one is idealism advances human rights and ethics. It promotes fundamental values such as democracy, freedom, and human dignity. So this view inspires countries and international bodies to take responsibility for protecting people's rights and preventing crimes like genocide and crimes against humanity. So it encourages a global commitment to justice and moral principles. So last but not least, idealism influences international law. So it supports important treaties like the Paris Climate Agreement, which require two countries to work together on global challenge. So this idealism is based on the belief that countries should follow international rule and settle dispute peacefully through court rather than resorting to force or violence. So the last impact of idealism in international relations is there are a criticism and limitation of idealism. So some argue that idealism is too optimistic or unrealistic because it sometimes overlooked that the fact that countries often act in their own nation interests and compete for power. For example, the League of Nations failed to prevent World War II, showing how idealism alone is not always enough to maintain peaceful. So, idealism has a strong positive influence on international relations by encouraging cooperation, peace, and respect for human rights. So, that's all from me. I will pass to the next presenter. Thank you.
So before we end our presentation for today, my name is IFFAH ADILAH. I would like to conclude idealism in international relation. So to summarize, idealism in international relation is a theory that promotes peace, morality, and international cooperation. It believes that countries can work together through laws, diplomacy, and shared values to avoid war and build a better world. So idealism became popular after World War I, with leaders like Woodrow Wilson encouraging peace and global unity. So while some criticize idealism for being too hopeful or unrealistic, it has played a big role in creating important institutions like the United Nations and shaping human rights law. In conclusion, idealism reminds us that progress and peace are possible when countries act with honesty, fairness, and a shared commitment to the common good. Even today, it continues to guide how nations try to solve problems together in a peaceful and ethical way. That's all from us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anis Shuhada, and my question to Group 3 is, why is idealism considered a hopeful theory in international relations? Thank you.
Thank you, Anis Shohada, for the questions. So basically, idealism is often viewed as a hopeful or optimistic theory because it is grounded in the belief that international peace and cooperation are possible through human reason, moral progress, and also shared values. Unlike realism, which emphasizes power, struggles, and inevitable conflict, idealism believes that war is not a permanent feature of the international system. Idealist argues that education, diplomacy, and also ethical governance can foster peaceful relationship between states. So, this belief in the potential for a better global order makes idealism attractive to those who envision a more than just a harmonious world. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. I'm BINTI from Group 2. My question is, how do international institutions support the idealist perspective? Thank you.
Okay, thank you Group 2 for your question. Now, to answer your question, the international institutions are central to idealists. This is because they provide the legal and diplomatic necessary for cooperation between states. So, the idealists believe that domestic society need rules to function. For example, the organization like United Nations, International Criminal Court, and the World Trade Organization are seen as tools to enforce international law. So, beside that, they also resolve dispute and prevent war. So, this institution help build trust among nations by creating transparent system for accountability and negotiation. As a result, dependence on military solution is reduced and promoting long-term peace. So I hope it will answer your question. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Ishrah. I am from Group 4. So my question is, what is the connection between idealism and the promotion of democracy? Thank you.
Now I will answer for the question 3. So the answer is idealism strongly supports the spread of democracy based on the belief that democratic states are less likely to go to war with one another. This idea is supported by the democratic peace theory, which argue that democracies are more peaceful because they are accountable to their citizens and more open to negotiation. Idealists view democracy as a system that encourages respect for human rights, individual freedoms, and rule of law, all values that align with peaceful international relations. By promoting democratic governance worldwide, idealists believe the international system will become more stable and just.
My name is Muhammad. So I'm from Group 5. I have a question. So my question is, why do idealists view economic independence as a peacekeeping tool? That's all.
Okay, thank you Zulfaka for the question. So idealists argue that economic interdependence reduces the likelihood of conflict because countries that are economically tied are less willing to risk war. So when nations benefit mutually from trade, investment, and globalization, the cost of military confrontation becomes too high. So this logic underpins the success of regional blocs like the European Union, where member states are so integrated economically that war is almost unthinkable. So idealists see global commerce not just as a financial tool but as a means to encourage dialogue, collaboration, and mutual benefit, which is essential element in maintaining international peace. So that's the answer. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aisha. I'm from Group 6. My question is, how do idealists propose peaceful change in the international system?
Thank you for your questions. And the answer is, idealists reject the idea that the global system is static or doomed to perpetual conflicts. They argue that changes is not only possible but necessary, and it can be achieved peacefully through diplomacy, education, and international cooperations. Idealists supports reforms in global governance structures to reflect evolving norms and challenges such as climate change and human rights. They also encourage cross-cultural exchange, international dialogue, and peace-building initiatives. By promoting mutual understanding and shared responsibilities, idealists believe that the international systems can gradually evolve into a more cooperative and ethical global society. That's all from our group. Thank you.